I had the pleasure of seeing your class today and see how you were teaching. So this observation conference is a post-observation, so I want to know kind of how you thought the lesson went and kind of hear from you with a few of these questions, and then I'll give you some more specifics that I observed when I was in there, and then hopefully we can give you some feedback on how to improve in some areas of strengths and weaknesses. All right, so you did a lesson about understanding the plot of fairy tales, and the students did a magazine interview with regarding Cinderella. So in terms of your instructional objectives, how did you think the lesson went?
I think it went well. I think the students, by keeping the lesson, I had two major sections of the lesson. Part of it reading, the part I was concerned about, I thought went well, where just reading the story to them, sometimes they can drift away, and I thought having them on the floor helped that. Then I thought being upfront honest with them about filling out the elements of the fairy tale part on the floor also helped them stay engaged without, again, use the word drifting off. And so I felt they got that objective done. And then kind of telling them that that would be the least fun part of it kind of got them on my side. And then they were able to enjoy the magazine interview part. And I really didn't know at first. I'd never done the magazine interview part, and I thought it went really well. And having them come up and change roles and do the interview and then have Cinderella, I thought went real well. And I was a little concerned because sometimes I had the boys read the part of Cinderella, but none of them seemed to think that was an issue. So I thought I reached my objective, yes, that they've got a really good concept, and we were able to dig in and reflect back on the elements of basic plots of classic fairy tales.
Did your assessments of the lesson go as planned?
Yes, they did. A more structured assessment may have given me more information, but for this particular lesson, I think it was appropriate, and I felt I got the information I needed.
Were you happy with your choices of teaching methods? Do you think they were effective?
I do, because it wasn't, I kind of felt like this could have been one, I could have just done one thing, but I wound up actually doing about 3 or 4 things, and it kind of kept them interested and motivated. They just kept they kept in the game. I took a simple story like Cinderella that they had heard a million times, even for 3rd grade. They might have drifted off, but I felt by changing it, the time and what I did was effective.
Great. I would completely agree with you in terms of the content of the lesson was right on point with what the students needed to be engaged. It was something applicable to them. All the kids loved fairy tales, so they liked that. They liked, being in partners. So I think that was a real strength for you in your lesson. I liked that your objectives were posted when I came into your room. However, just a little piece of suggestion and feedback is if you could post them in such a way that they're student friendly, like I will be able to tell the plot of a fairy tale and then refer back to that as the lesson progresses, then they take ownership of their learning. So as the administrator, I should be able to walk into your room and ask any child what they're working on, and they should be able to tell you that.
Oh, very good, yeah.
But that's, something, just a little piece that you could work on for the future. The knowledge of the subject, you had appropriate content activities. The students really seemed to enjoy being away from their desks and on the floor. It's just a different environment you set up the storytelling environment for the students, and a lot of times they don't get that at home, so that was a really good setup. I noticed with your student engagement that when you were on the floor, you had about 17 kids engaged, and then you had all of the students engaged when you broke up them into their pairs. So I thought that engagement kind of went increased as the lesson went along. The materials and materials and methods were really appropriate for the lesson. The overhead and Elmos was probably a very accurate thing, a piece of technology to use to show the whole class
Mhm.
how you wanted that story elements chart filled out,
Mhm.
and gave the students a clear vision of what you wanted, what their expectation was.
Mhm.
I would suggest maybe a little more technology next
Okay.
time. Perhaps what you mentioned in our pre-observation conference is that you've done some recordings of the story before. Perhaps you might want to break them into centers at that point and let them listen to the story in smaller
Oh,
groups.
uh-huh.
That might have increased your engagement a little bit more. So instead of 17, you might have had all 23 if they were in centers
Oh,
listening
right.
to it.
Okay.
Also, what I noticed in your classroom was that your classroom management was extremely on point. The students knew exactly what their expectations were. They knew who their partners were ahead of time. So when you asked for them to move to their groups, they did so without any sort of disruption or fussing or anything like that. So I appreciated
Mhm.
seeing your classroom environment and knowing that they have your clear-cut classroom rules. They know where to go. They know what to do. They worked well in their groups. They
Mhm.
took turns appropriately. So that was a real strength of yours as well. Let's see. Your organization of the instruction was very good. You used appropriate language with your students. I think that even though you have third graders, and some people might think that they're young little kids, you speak to them as if they're not necessarily adults, but
Right.
you use academic language
Right.
with your students. You convey your expectations for them quite well, and that I think sets them up for a good future when they're in an academic setting. One suggestion also is your questioning, your
Uh-huh.
levels of bloom and your depth of knowledge questions that you asked were mainly on that knowledge and comprehension level.
Mhm.
So if there was a way to kind of enhance those levels so that you're more of analysis and application,
Uh-huh.
that would be really good for their critical thinking skills. A lot of times the ISTEP questions are levels 3 and 4 of
Right.
depth of knowledge, so to prepare them. So one suggestion I would make to you, and I was looking at your lesson plans, and I saw the questions that you wanted to ask the students,
Right.
and I saw that a lot of them came from the lesson in the teacher's manual as well.
Uh-huh.
You can take those questions and then tweak them to
Mhm.
make them higher level,
Right.
and just put them in your lesson plan so you know when you get to them that
Okay.
you are intentionally asking them. So maybe using a question shell, or asking them to come up with their own magazine questions
Oh.
might have been a way to
Right.
do some more application. So after they
Mhm.
went through, you could have had a space for
Right.
them to add their own 2 questions
Yeah.
in, so you can see, do they really understand the elements of the plot, because they were asking those appropriate questions of their
Right.
peers. So that would have been a really good way to enhance that lesson.
Okay.
Talked about participation. They did their group rules and their work responsibilities were really good. Your atmosphere and discipline, management of time. One thing that I really noticed is when I came into your classroom for your observation, you guys were right on your schedule. You were doing exactly what you said your schedule said that you were going to do. So overall, I enjoyed the lesson very much.
Thank you.
And so I hope I've been able to give you a little bit of feedback.
Absolutely.
In terms. So do you have any questions for me at this time?
No, I like the idea of, I wish I'd have thought of it then, of having them write a question. That's a good idea. No, none at all. Thank you.
All right.
So-
Oh, one other thing is, when you were having the students kind of model for the other
Mhm.
students how to do the interviewing and interview, I think even though you chose students that you said could handle that
Right.
as a job, perhaps if this was their first time doing this interviewing and interviewee process, that maybe you and one of your higher performing
right.
students you could be the interviewer and then have them answer and then
Answer.
switch. That would be a true modeling of
Oh, okay.
the lesson, and then perhaps you can say, now can I have 2 students come up and do it, and then break up into your groups and do it from then on. So,
Okay.
just,
Good suggestion, yeah.
keep modeling as much as you
Right.
can for the students. That'll
Right.
be beneficial for them.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.